This lake contains thousands of years of ancient history. This is Lake Nasser, the world's largest man-made lake. This stretch of the Nile is almost completely forgotten. Glorious reminders of ancient Egypt and their neighbors to the south, the Nubians, with its temples dedicated to mysterious gods.
The island of Osiris, equal on either side.
And tombs built to house the soul for eternity.
He was an Egyptian man sent down into Nubia to control the taxes coming up from the kingdom of Kush. This is the real ancient Egypt.
A landscape unspoiled by tourists. That is why I am sailing down the length of the Egyptian Lake Nasser to bring you closer to discover the history of these wonderful sites.
We are now approaching Wadi es-Sebua, the Valley of the Lions.
These ancient marvels had to be rescued in the 60s from the flooding created by the lake. A 2-decade-long international effort to save history. As I travel the entire length of Lake Nasser by boat, we stop at every site along the way.
I'm going to take you to see the top of Philae Temple. This fortress was used as a hideout. Let's go see inside.
To discover the Egyptian history, as well as the connection to their ancient foe, the Nubians.
Ramses on his horse and chariot, shooting his bow and arrow.
From the struggles of Thutmose and Hatshepsut,
the real builder of this temple,
to the spectacular achievements of Egypt's greatest pharaoh, Ramses II.
He is here, a high priest. Tawazre became a fully fledged pharaoh.
His endearing love for Queen Nefertari,
shown as equals. The original location for the Temple of Dhaka.
And we investigate the kings of Nubia, some of which you may have never heard of before. Come with on this epic voyage through 5,000 years of history. Join me as we sail towards the ancient land of gold. Egyptian President Nasser holds a press conference and officially announces the construction of the Aswan High Dam. In addition to the Aswan Low Dam, this was to create the world's largest man-made lake. But a consequence of this was the flooding of tens of ancient Egyptian monuments. Delegates selected by UNESCO came together from all around the world in Egypt in a project headed by Christine Desroches-Noblecoeur. It was her idea to dismantle the temples and relocate them to save them from the monumental rise in water levels. But time was against them. Were they to stop the economic growth of modern Egypt or hold on to the ancient past? The lake, spanning 500 kilometers and 16 kilometers wide, was to bring new irrigation systems to Egypt, as well as providing them with constant electricity. Thousands of Nubian and Sudanese families saw their houses washed away. The Egyptian government relocated them to new locations. In 1964, President Nasser pressed the button and the lake began to fill. This was the moment that the landscape of Egypt changed forever. The teams moving the temples only had 10 years left to move them before they were completely submerged. Some sites, like the mud brick fortress of Buhen, had to be left behind to flood, Only images remain today. Other temples had to be dismantled and relocated, a project that took over a decade for some. Many countries helped fund the giant relocation project. Egypt's way to thank these foreign nations was gifting them smaller temples to display in their museums. Like the Temple of Dendur in New York, Tafet Temple given to the Netherlands, Elysia, the rock-cut temple given to Italy, now in Turin, and to Spain, the Temple of Debod, relocated to Madrid. By 1970, the dam was complete. By 1974, the reservoir had been filled. The majority of the temples had been successfully relocated. In the late 90s, cruise boats began to take tourists. This closed less than 5 years later. And only in recent years has it reopened, with less than 5 boats welcoming visitors. To fully understand Lake Nasser, we begin our journey just on the other side of the Aswan Dam, high up on the hill of Kubbet el-Hawa. This sacred site that overlooks the glistening waters of the Nile contains tombs starting back from Egypt's 6th dynasty from over 4,300 years ago. Surprisingly, this extravagant tomb is from a non-monarch, a nomarch. Sarenput, and his son is here, Ankh-Nura. Around 1800 BC, during the reign of Pharaoh Senusert, Sarenput independently ruled over Elephantine, placing his name into a royal cartouche, meaning Nub Kaura, the golden spirit of Ra. Pharaoh Senusert had gone into Nubia and conquered it. Now, nomarch Sarenput was in charge of all the trade from Nubia that had to pass through Elephantine into Egypt. An earlier tomb belonging to a man named Sanbi from around 2200 BC. He was sent into Nubia to recover his father's body, who had died during an expedition there to recover gold from the country. Now their spirits enjoy this beautiful view from their rock-cut tombs in the mountain of Kubbet el-Hawa. This necropolis on the border of Egypt and Nubia had been used for over 4,000 years. Then, in the 5th and the 6th century, in the Byzantine period, this tomb was reconditioned into a Christian church. It's strange to think that a place such as this has been subject to the worship of so many different higher beings, such as the tomb of Sarenput I, the mayor of Elephantine, and the high priest of the patron god of the island, which just happens to be our next stop on our adventure toward Nubia. Khnum, the god that was worshipped here at Elephantine, the ram that lived on this island, the god of creation, the one who would mold the image of man.
One of the main deities that were worshipped here at Elephantine, apart from the main god of the island, which is Khnum, we have Anuket. And Anuket is a very interesting goddess. She's known for protecting the Nile. And what's really strange, she's shown with this sort of cone-shaped crown. And this cone-shaped crown is what inspired Nefertiti to have her own crown. Because Nefertiti is shown with a unique crown only worn by Nefertiti. And here we can see that quite well, that this crown is what inspired Nefertiti. So in a way, because Nefertiti was divine in her own way, Nefertiti might have been wanting to connect with the protection of the Nile.
There are many temples on Elephantine Island dedicated to female deities, like this one dedicated to the goddess of love and beauty, Hathor. This temple is attributed to a pharaoh who spread the empire deeper into Nubia.
We have Thutmose III here, wearing his military uniform, being blessed by the creator god, Khnum. On the other side, we have Satis, shown with the crown, the white crown of Egypt, wearing a double falcon necklace. She's so beautiful. And she is on the other side, holding Thutmose next to Amun.
Yet it was a female pharaoh who commissioned this temple, the stepmother of Thutmose III.
Hatshepsut here, we know it's Hatshepsut because she has been completely chiseled out. All the chisel marks are visible here. And it's interesting because this temple, you can see the images inside the temple actually resemble Hatshepsut, not Thutmose III. It's a more feminine face. But Thutmose III came in, stamped his name, and took out Hatshepsut. But some good guy did come along at one point, and some of the names of Thutmoses have been hacked out because that guy knew that this was the real builder of this temple. This is Hatshepsut, and here is an example of where someone came in. They knew that this is not Thutmoses. They came, they started chipping out his name, and someone caught them because obviously they had stopped.
This island was not only a place of worship. Many houses made of mud brick are dotted around, layers upon layers of thousands of years of habitation.
We have just been presented with a mummified child's foot, a baby's foot. One of the guys here have found it in one of these homes. It is, you can see the temples, you can see the homes, Lami.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come in contact with an ancient Egyptian, a piece of the real person.
Different feelings at all.
Yeah.
And the baby has like only 4 months or 6 months. It seems very, very small. I think only 4 or 6 months, not bigger than this.
It's amazing.
We can feel their spirit, how
this is the real person.
Real person, real baby. We can imagine how his father was sad and his mother was sad when he passed away.
Yeah.
So now, me and you, we went back thousands of years with them with this baby.
Exactly. This is the real ancient Egypt right here.
The first time in my life to see a baby mummified.
It's very touching.
Yes, very, very touching. Very.
Shukran gazila.
Elephantine is a strange mix of habitation, temples, and tombs. Around 2250 BC, Hekaib, a nomarch around the reign of Pharaoh Pepi, had fought against the Nubians and became the pharaoh's chief trading officer. Hekaib was revered by many, including his very distant successor, Sarenput. Going back to that mummified baby's foot, it made me think about the people that lived here, not the pharaohs, the ordinary people. What was life like for them? Further south, we enter a controlled buffer zone between the Nile and Lake Nasser.
Philae Temple, the Temple of Isis, the Temple of Hathor is there as well. But we're not just going to see Philae today. There is another place very nearby, a counterpart island, that I want to take everybody to see.
By 1906, the low dam had submerged Philae. But now, how would the high dam affect it?
There is the old location of Philae Temple. and they moved it around 1972, and they finished the project in 1981. And it's happened when they built the high dam, so the level of water between the two dams, the British dam over there and the high dam, became lower, so they could to see the Angelica Island. They surround the temple was like 3,000 wedges made of stainless steel. To surround the temple was and to not allow to the water to be in, so they surround it totally and completely, and they cut it around into thousands of pieces and move it from here to there.
By controlling the water, now one of Egypt's most beautiful temples can be gazed upon yet again. Here the wife of the god of the next life, Isis, was worshipped. Isis, not being a selfish goddess, shared the island with Hathor. The most ancient part of this site dates back to Pharaoh Nectanebo in 360 BC, although the majority of this site is built by the Greek ruling pharaohs, the Ptolemies.
The Romans had a big settlement here in Aswan. We even have a Roman emperor here shown in full pharaonic dress, giving offerings to a Nubian god, the god Mandalus. Mandalus's main temple was further south. We will be going there, but it's so interesting that you can see the Romans getting involved in Egyptian and even Nubian culture.
With the death of Cleopatra, the Romans invaded Egypt, followed by the Christians. The final people to worship the ancient Egyptian gods lived here. This text in Greek tells us in 394 AD, this site was cleansed of the pagan Egyptian gods.
This image here of Ptolemy has such a great example of the Coptic chipping to remove the images, the pagan images, from this temple.
The Egyptians believed that defacing an image would take away the spirit connected to it. Ironically, Ptolemy is shown here smiting the enemies of Egypt, whose faces have also been chipped out. But not all chipping was malicious.
These weird scratchings that we see here are actually not created by birds or anything like that, or weathering. It's a specific scratching action that's happened here. What that is, people used to come here many years ago, thousands of years ago, to temples and scratch away at the sacred surface of the temple, because the temple was a gift from the god. It was the god's house. Scratch away and put it into a little bottle. They would go home with a little essence of that. Some people used to mix that into magic potions and things to be connected to the divine force of this temple.
The force with which they wanted to connect was that of the goddess Isis. Isis was the mother of Horus. Horus was the reincarnated pharaoh on earth. The father of Horus and the husband of Isis was Osiris, the ruler of the underworld. He first ruled on earth, then, when he was murdered, he was reassembled by his wife Isis. She then became pregnant spiritually from him. One myth at Philae is that Khnum from Elephantine helped Isis create the form of Horus. The very heart of this temple revered the power, determination, and love of Isis.
The inner sanctuary of the temple of Isis on Philae. And this offering table, it's more a plinth actually, would have had a golden statue of Isis. And this is where the priests would have come to adore the goddess. Inside here is one of the most beautiful depictions I've seen of the goddess Hathor, shown as a beautiful woman in the Ptolemaic style with the beautiful head of a cow, so elegantly carved.
It's ironic that the Nile almost killed this temple and then saved it. The ancients relied heavily on reading the level of the flood.
Down here, we have a nilometer, nilometer, depending where in the world you're from, that's what you're going to call it. And this is how they would have measured whether the Nile was going to flood correctly to make the harvest fruitful.
For thousands of years, the flooding of the Nile could predict prosperity or disaster. Up until the 20th century, Egypt still monitored flooding. Now the god of the Nile is controlled by Lake Nasser.
The rocks that we see behind us here are depicted even over here. And what's so special about this depiction is it's the god Hapi shown being protected by the snake in his home underneath these stones in the cataracts of the Nile. The cataracts which are here at Elephantine. This is Hapi inside his home. It is something so special. I'm going to take you to see the top of Philae Temple. This is quite special to come onto the top of an ancient Egyptian temple.
From here, we can see this beautiful landscape, this unique landscape.
Built around the temple of Isis. I always connect this temple to the color green because of the greenery that grows around it. The green of the fertility of Isis and Osiris.
It is quite special.
I think I'm just going to sit here for a little bit and take it in. Behind us here is the island of Bega. Bega is the island of Osiris, right adjacent to the island of Isis, of Philae, before it was actually moved. And at this temple, Osiris was worshipped. We can see here, this is what it used to look like. This is the island of Bega. There were actually Nubian people living on the island for thousands of years. From here, you can see the main columns. But now, that is all that remains. On this picture, taken from the early 1900s, we can see the archway of Bega going into the temple where the boats would have arrived going to worship Osiris, viewing the original temple of Isis on the other side.
Isis, who fought so hard to save her husband, is now no longer in view with Osiris anymore. Crossing the Aswan High Dam, we are now on Lake Nasser. The island temple of Kalabsha is dedicated to a Nubian god named Mangulus. The construction of this temple was completed during Roman Emperor Augustus's reign around 30 BC.
You'll actually find throughout many Egyptian temples in the later period that there are empty cartouches. And even though this cartouche didn't have a name in it, someone has tried to just gouge out. Probably just to make sure that if someone was planning to put their name in there, it would ruin their reputation anyway. A temple would now be, erected by the priests to dedicate it to a certain god. And then depending on how the pharaoh was pleasing priests, they could then get their names placed into certain areas to connect them now to the temple because they've reached that level. And this is the inner sanctuary filled with the gods, equal on either side.
Because this temple is dedicated to the Nubian god Mangulus, Inside, we see a strong connection as well to the Egyptian god Horus. From the roof of Kalabsha, you get an idea of the remoteness of the site.
Oh wow, shukran.
One of the theories about why Roman Emperor Augustus completed this temple and dedicated it to Mangulus, a Nubian god, was to get the Nubians on his side before his attempted invasion. Left is Nubian Mangulus with Egyptian Horus on the right in this sparsely decorated temple.
Around the back of Kalabsha Temple, we have a pharaoh offering to Isis, Horus, and Mangulus in his human form, with a bit of blue paint still on his face and inlays for precious stones in the eyes. We go on, we have Horus again, Isis, and Osiris.
In 1970, the temple was already beginning to flood. Work was started to relocate it. It was cut into 13,000 stones and moved by boat to its new island location, 50 kilometers north. This island was large enough that it could accommodate more than one temple. The Temple of Beit al-Wali, built by Ramses II in 1200 BC. This fierce conqueror is shown defeating the Nubians in battle with his two sons behind. The other side shows the defeat of the Syrians. The prince presenting captive Libyans, while Pharaoh Ramses holds up the Syrians by their hair. Many of these captives were taken to Egypt to work, but some were executed by the pharaoh. They might be a little bit of propaganda, but the fact is, Ramses was riding on his chariot, killing enemies, smiting the people from Libya, as we can see here. Well, yeah, a lot of people say that he exaggerated. Maybe he did, but he did actually fight all these battles. So who are we to say? On the other wall, we see Nubian captives being brought into Pharaoh, along with the Kushites bringing in their tribute, such as foreign animals like giraffes, bulls, monkeys, leopards, and ostriches. Even though Egypt is in Africa, these exotic African animals were seen as a great gift to give to the Egyptians. The Nubians even gifted Ramses his pet lion. Ramses' eldest son seen being gifted for bringing in the tributes from Nubia.
The great King Ramses, standing before the goddess Mut, the wife of Amun. Yet in Ramses' time, when we see Mut, in fact, it is modeled off of the face of the great royal wife, Ramses' one true love, Nefertari, because Ramses was Amun, Nefertari was Mut on earth.
Inside the temple of Beit al-Wali are some of the best preserved colored scenes.
Of my favorite pharaoh, Ramses II. Here, Ramses holding a Nubian, smiting him in full color. Look at the red of his skin, the yellow to represent the gold. He's wearing the white crown or the white headcloth. We see here Hathor and Ramses offering to Horus with Selket, the scorpion goddess, to protect from poisons and bites. But look how beautiful the color is here. It's Ramses burning incense over pomegranates, grapes, breads, and they are still colored. It is absolutely beautiful. We have a triad statue of Ramses, Mut, and Hathor. It's incredible. Ramses over here shown again, so colorful, so beautiful. I've never seen him like this. Offering a green goddess, Ma'at, to Amun. Here we have the blue on Amun, showing that he is in his hidden form. It is so beautiful. Amun again being offered Ma'at, being offered justice, balance. It's incredible. Further down, before we go into the inner sanctum, is seen repeated. Ramses now giving jars of oil to Amun, another triad statue, this time with the god from Elephantine. We have Khnum, Ramses in the middle, and Anuket. It is beautiful. We see Satis, another goddess from Elephantine. Khnum, the god of creation, seated, while Ramses II and Anuket come in and give them offerings. In fact, the goddesses behind Ramses are supporting him before the other gods, supporting the fact that Ramses II is in fact on his way to become a god. Again, Ramses on the other side, shown smiting a Libyan, the two major enemies of Ramses II, repeated twice here. The inner sanctuary, we have the gods again repeated from the outside on the inside. But the most amazing thing is this image of Ramses II being suckled by a goddess. Isn't it just amazing? The young prince with a beautiful goddess. Here he offers jars to Ra, Horus. I've never seen Ramses in so much color. Before, Amun and Amun Min, right over here, inside this inner sanctum, would have been probably a golden statue dedicated to Ramses II, because in fact, Ramses declared he was a god. So Ramses would have been in here. We see Ptah on the other side. Amun again being burnt incense of frankincense by Ramses II. Khnum, the creator god, creating life for Ramses. Khnum gave life to Ramses because Ramses lived until he was around 96. And the life from Khnum that went into Ramses created over 150 children. And here is the goddess Anuket, yet again suckling the young prince when he was probably around 13 years old, because Ramses became a co-regent with Seti, his father, at around 16 years old. So here he is being prepared. He is being fed by the goddess to become the pharaoh.
Across the arid island is the Chapel of Dedwen. Dedwen was a Nubian Kushite deity known for gifting wealth and prosperity. He became the patron of incense, a very important commodity to the Nubians. This Nubian chapel was built around 600 BC.
Seti I, the father of Ramses II, erected this giant stela dedicated to his war against the people of Lebanon, because Seti was a great warrior, just as his son would be.
Near Seti's stela is another temple by Ramses II, but to see the best part of this temple, we have to go to the Nubian Museum in Aswan.
A salvaged piece from a temple of Ramses II. And this giant statue was saved from when Lake Nasser was created and flooded that area of the Nile. It is just absolutely beautiful to see Ramses II in beautiful full color.
This temple was called Per Ptah, the House of Ptah, and was issued by Setau, the viceroy of Kush, the Egyptian representative based in Nubia. Unfortunately, most of this temple is now flooded, and only the outer courtyard and one interior statue could be salvaged. Perpeta was originally located 90 kilometers south from its new location.
In this temple known as Garf Hussein, which is actually by Ramses II, you can see Ramses here next to Horus. But what I love are these giant depictions of the pharaoh over here with Sekhmet and Ptah. It is absolutely beautiful. They are absolutely giant. Look at the size of some of these depictions of Ramses II. It's absolutely monumental. I can't believe it, that I'm actually seeing this. I've been studying these temples for years, and I'm actually here. So it's sort of like a dream come true for me.
Looking out at Lake Nasser, between the giant, colossal statues of Ramses. This splendid Hathor kiosk, moved 30 kilometers from the site of Keratasi, was the place where the image of Isis would rest on her journey to Lower Nubia. A similar journey that I am embarking on the private Sai Safari boat. A day's sailing, and 200 kilometers later, we pull ashore for the night. I don't think I could have prepared myself for just how rural Lake Nasser actually is. No signs of life, power lines, or another boat for miles. It's quite peaceful, actually.
The mound behind me, that's now submerged under Lake Nasser, was the original location for the Temple of Dhaka.
You could quite possibly count the amount of people that live along Lake Nasser on one hand. They live such a simple life, in such a beautiful landscape. You can't help but wonder, do we have it wrong?
Some of the houses you'll see along the lake in the little islands now are so traditional. They look exactly like the houses would have looked 3,000 years ago. Mud brick, the palm leaves to make the roof, the palm stems to make the patio outside. It's very traditional, tradition that hasn't died. We are now approaching Wadi es-Sebua, the Valley of the Lions. I've been looking forward to seeing this temple for so long.
This site has 3 relocated temples.
Just over the sand dune, you can see the temple of the Valley of the Lions of Ramses II.
We are given a warm welcome by the man who lives at this site by himself, employed to care for the temple. Wadi es-Sebua was built very close to the river and experienced annual flooding. The protective sphinxes were often drowned. Waiting for the flood to subside, engineers had a very small window of opportunity to dismantle the temple and relocate it. Thankfully, by the early 70s, it was saved and moved 4 kilometers inland. Order over chaos was restored, much like the story of the falcon Horus defeating the evil Set and avenging his father Osiris. Captive Nubian enemies crouch below the lion-headed Sphinx of Ramses II. South are the Nubians, and north are the Libyans. The Sphinx was a harsh reminder that you obeyed the Egyptians here. This temple was originally named the Domain of Amun in the worship of Ramses.
Inside the hallway, walking towards the temple of Amun, are these beautiful sphinxes of Ramses. As you walk up, you hear the echoes coming back to you from the temple walls. Ramses standing here with a beautiful woman at his side. Let's go see. It's actually one of Ramses' daughters, named Bintanath.
Around year 25 of Ramses' reign, she is given the title of Great Royal Wife, although she wasn't a wife in that sense, since Ramses and his late wife, Nefertari, disapproved of inbreeding. Bintanath's name is Semitic of Canaanite origin.
This colossal statue of Ramses II holding the staff of Khnum, the creator god. But what's even more impressive is the dedication on the outside. Ramses II smiting the enemies, presenting them before Amun.
Shown as an equal to the god, Ramses wears the feathers of Amun, smiting the Nubians for him and smiting the Libyans for Ra on the other side. This site was the official residence of Setau, the Egyptian nobleman who in year 35 of Ramses' reign became the viceroy of Kush. Ramses trusted Setau to set up this temple as a key trading point for people traveling to and from Egypt between Nubia. For centuries, this forecourt would have been bustling with traders. But that was all the public was allowed to see. Further in the temple, the pharaoh becomes divine.
Inside this temple, Ramses II is declaring himself to be a god. For in fact, we see the god Atum holding Ramses II with his name above.
This North Egyptian god was said to have created the universe.
Ramses, in essence, becoming a god. On the other side, we see Ramses II offering to Amun, Ra, and in the center, himself.
The hidden one, Amun, the king of the gods. On the other side, we see the god Geb, the god of the earth, seated with Ramses, being offered to by the pharaoh. In a lower register, we see the god Amun-Min, Amun as the fertility god, with Ramses appeasing him. Bathed in sunlight, Ramses seated between Amun and his wife Mut. Although Nefertari had died by then, this image of Mut is most probably inspired by Nefertari, since she was the god's wife. Inside this court with pillars lined with statues of Ramses in the form of Osiris, we get the idea that he's taking on more religious roles rather than militaristic endeavors.
The inner sanctuary here shows Ramses II offering to several gods.
1,600 years after its construction, this temple was converted into a Christian church. Ramses on either side offering flowers, but now an image has been altered. In the center, we see an image of Saint Peter. This sanctuary would have originally housed the barge of the gods. On the walls, we see Ramses offering to the barge, an event that actually took place here. The other side, Ramses wears a cap crown or headcloth while pouring out oils and burning incense before the barge. On the barge is the shrine of Amun. The pharaoh holds the staff of the god while offering him lotus oils. And from this, Ramses is given strength from the wife of Amun. A diverse range of gods here, Anath on the left, Tefnut with the lioness head, Ramses, and the god of hunting and war named Anhur. Ramses had a very deep religious understanding. Religion was probably one of the most important things in ancient Egypt, and to study religion was lifting you onto the level of purity. Many people were not allowed in these temples, so you had to have a deep understanding of what you were looking at.
Ramses offering incense to Ptah, himself, Geb, and a beautiful depiction of Hathor shown with the body of a woman and the head of a cow. Quite unique. But what I love the most is Ramses between Hathor and Geb, here shown in full color, wearing his war armor and beautiful blue lapis necklaces.
Showcasing so many gods in one temple meant that Ramses was connecting himself to them, like Amun, who is the king of the gods.
Two sphinxes holding the key of life, wearing the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt. These are the sphinxes on the outside of this temple, and they are protecting the name of Ramses II.
Ramses wanted to protect his name. That is why he stamped it over and over to ensure we still spoke about him today.
Because this was used by the Coptics, this temple, much of the ceiling has been blacked out. But interestingly, Ramses' name has been taken out with the cross.
Exiting, I start to think of all of those exotic animals brought from Nubia into Egypt that would have rested right here. 1 kilometer away is a much more recent temple that was also relocated. This temple was made of much smaller stones, and by the early 20th century it had completely collapsed, making its relocation much easier. We already sailed past its original location, 40 kilometers north. This is the Temple of Dhaka. An effigy of the Egyptian god of wisdom, Thoth, was housed in this naos, with this beautiful light effect around. A repeated theme in ancient Egypt, the balance between light and dark. Anhur and Mangulus merging as one, the combination of Egyptian and Nubian gods are shown in this temple because it was a collaborative effort between Greek pharaoh Ptolemy IV and the Nubian pharaoh Archemani from Meroe. Dating from around 220 BC, the king from deep south in Meroe, Archemani, is shown in this sanctuary. The temple was originally built to affirm the ties between Egypt and Nubia in their trade and military efforts. In the Roman period around 30 BC, Emperor Augustus expanded this temple, building the large entrance pylon. Then, Emperor Tiberius transformed this temple into a Roman fort. Following that, it was used by the Christians, and many Jewish graffiti can be found on the walls still, some believe showing the Ark of the Covenant. This new landscape of Lake Nasser remains unspoiled, and I hope it stays that way. Another Roman period temple, undecorated, was moved in 1966, 35 kilometers south, now known as the Temple of Merharka. It was dedicated to Isis and Serapis. It's sunset, and it's sadly time to sail on. Good night. We are now 250 kilometers from Aswan, halfway on our journey.
Let's go see the temple at Amada.
Our first stop is not a temple, it is a tomb, an entire mountain that was moved 30 kilometers from Aniba near Kasr Ibrim.
In the tomb here of Pennut, it's quite small for a man of such stature, because Pennut was the viceroy of Kush. That meant he was an Egyptian man sent down into Nubia to control the taxes coming up from the kingdom of Kush. In his tomb, we can see his wife and the man Pennut giving a text to, giving a text to the god Thoth. Thoth writing down that they have not sinned. Quite ironic, considering Pennut sanctioned the robbing of the Valley of the Kings during the reign of Ramses VI. And here we see Pennut's wife and himself again before Horus. Horus presenting them to Osiris, shown in his red dress, and this time not with green skin, wearing a nemes and a crown, the white crown. Here we can see Isis and Nephthys behind, supporting Osiris in his decision to allow the viceroy into heaven. Down here, we can see Pennut on his knees before the cow goddess Hathor, and Hathor is welcoming him into his tomb. This mound is his tomb, the mound that was moved in the 60s. It's amazing. Here's the tomb inside, and Hathor coming out with the lotus and papyrus, greeting the man. Down here is the most intact image of Pennut in the entire tomb. It is Pennut in the middle, being poured over, being cleansed by Thoth and Anubis. The water painted with this beautiful blue, because Pennut started to gain power. The priests started to gain power, and this is where Egypt began to decline. Over here is Pennut's wife,
shaking a sistrum, and Pennut giving an offering of lotus and papyrus flowers to Osiris. We see the solar barge, which would have taken Pennut on his journey to the afterlife. In the center is a triad statue that would have featured Pennut in the middle, maybe his wife on this side, and a daughter on that side. We're not sure, but Pennut was shown under the protection of the cow goddess Hathor coming out of the tomb, the same scene that we see on the walls. Down here is Pennut and his wife and his family bringing the offerings to Horus, giving them back to Pennut for him to enjoy in the afterlife. Down here is probably the most telling scene. It's Pennut shown with two priests adorning him in jewelry, the jewelry that he sanctioned to be stolen from the Valley of the Kings. It is absolutely incredible to see this. We see very few people depicted like this. Here, Pennut is raised. He's shown in a bigger figure than the priests. Thus, he is more important. Usually, a pharaoh was the only figure shown taller than the average person.
Now crumbled away, it is in the tomb here that we read that Ramses VI rewarded Pennut for his work done in Nubia. He was a high priest. His wife was a high priestess named Taka, and she used to sing and play the sistrum in the temple at Aniba.
So this is yours.
Okay.
Okay, what's the name?
No.
Selkit. Well, it's the goddess Selkit, the scorpion goddess who protects you from bites. Here she is. Wow.
Just a few hundred meters from the tomb of Pennut is the temple of Derr. In 1966, the relocation of this temple proved to be rather tricky. Since the temple was carved into the mountain, it had to be cut into individual blocks and transported by boat to its new location, preserving the 3,200-year-old temple of Ramses II. The temple was overseen by Hoi, the viceroy of Kush and the predecessor of Setau. In the outer courtyard is a scene of Ramses' son bringing in captive Nubians before the pharaoh. By this time, Egypt had seen a long conflict and peace with Nubia. The Nubians were not only captives, they were revered for their warrior-like abilities, many of them being brought to Egypt as expert archers.
Here, I've just seen something that's made my day. Ramses II in battle, smiting his enemies before Amun. But here is Ramses' pet lion. This is Ma-Hes, the pet lion that's depicted at Bait al-Wali and Abu Simbel, and here at Derr. This lion was trained by the Nubians and brought to Ramses as a gift. We can see Ma-Hes's name written here at the top with the determinative of a lion. Ramses gave this lion an identity, and the name means the one who is beside him. This lion shone beside the great pharaoh.
Dedicated to a triad of gods, no expense was spared in the decoration.
We have Ramses II standing by the tree of life. He's picking his name off of the tree, his royal name, and he is presenting his name towards the god Ptah and Sekhmet. And next to that, we have the god of wisdom, Thoth,
writing down exactly what is happening. He's giving Ramses his name.
No war scenes inside this temple, rather religious scenes showing the Egyptians' fervent belief system. Vivid images of the gods like Hathor, the god of fertility, Amun-Min, shown with his erect phallus before the pharaoh. Ramses, frozen in time in procession.
Here is Ramses II, shown wearing the leopard dress with the cap crown. He is here, a high priest. But what's interesting, Ramses and the other priests are presenting the barge with a statue of Ramses towards, no guess, Ramses himself. As we go further south, Ramses is becoming more divine.
This temple feels completely unspoiled. No modern-day lighting, only bursts of sunlight coming through the door. I feel like one of the ancient explorers seeing this temple for the first time. The boldness of colors, the variety of scenes, the change in style of the pharaoh. Here we see Atum greeting Ramses II with the key of life. The pharaoh is shown directly with the gods, like Amun with his beautifully painted blue skin still visible, and the goddess Isis Hathor holding the pharaoh lovingly. Before the sanctuary, Ramses burns incense for Ra and Hathor. This temple is dedicated to Amun, Ptah, and Ra Horakhti, hence the vast amount of falcon-headed sun deities shown with the pharaoh, like here where we see the god of war, Montu. Horus holding hands with the pharaoh as he receives the key of life, while wearing two beautiful blue wings as his war uniform.
Ramses offering Ma'at, justice, balance, to Amun, Ramses, and the wife of Amun, Mut. But here, Ramses is in the middle, in some way, because Nefertari is known as Mary Mut, the one that pleases Mut. She is the god's wife. In some way, this is Nefertari, Ramses, and Amun.
Nefertari would not be mentioned at this temple since she died before its construction. Hoi, the viceroy of Kush, commissioned this temple to be built to commemorate Ramses' 30th year of reign for his jubilee. It is shortly after this jubilee that we see Ramses taking a step back from his military roles and focusing more and more on his religious duties. The priests raised Ramses to the level of a god for what he had accomplished in the country already. A telling scene is the goddess Seshat writing down millions of years of life for the pharaoh. Seshat's prediction certainly has given Ramses immortality. Whether he will be around for millions of years, who knows, but certainly longer than any of us will remember.
Ramses on either side greeting us into his inner sanctum, burning incense before the barge of himself. Niches here for stela to be placed. Ramses appearing as the god of the moon, Khonsu, then giving offerings to Ptah, shown wearing the cap on his crown. In such color, I can't believe it. I've never seen Ramses so colorful before. The inner sanctum with the four seated statues and Ramses in the center. The king giving an offering to Ra, Ramses' namesake. Again, the barge The same scene repeated on this side. Yet, Ramses II, shown here in the most beautiful color. Look at his skin, the nemes, the blue on his jewelry. It is absolutely breathtaking. And to be in this temple on Lake Nasser that was relocated, it's just incredible. But what's more incredible is I have this temple all to myself. And in some ways, I would like for tourists to come and see this. But in another way, I don't. Because I don't want these places to lose their magic.
A few meters away is another marvel.
This is the temple of Thutmose III, from the original location at Amada. This entire temple, because it was so fragile, was loaded onto a plinth and moved here 6 kilometers when Lake Nasser was constructed. It's just incredible that they moved the entire temple in situ as a one complete structure. Let's go see inside.
Thutmose III ruled Egypt over 3,500 years ago. This temple is one of the first and oldest Egyptian temples created in Nubia. Thutmose III is a mighty warrior, although he's also remembered from the drama between him and his stepmother, Hatshepsut, who also ruled. Many of the faces of Thutmose have been hacked out subsequently after his death. Many successors of Thutmose added on to this temple, calling Thutmose the Lord of Bega, connecting him to the god of the dead, Osiris. Like Ramses years later, Thutmose is also shown being suckled by the goddesses. Many Coptic graffiti from the 6th century can be found here, drawn by Coptic priests who used this as a church and housing. The first court might be largely damaged, but go inside and you'll be astounded by the level of detail. The sanctuary is shared between Thutmose III and his son and successor Amenhotep II. A thought-out slit in the ceiling was carved to allow light to bathe the temple.
Thutmose III, shown wearing a yellow nemes, beautiful turquoise necklaces, with the god Ra on this side and Ra Horakti on the other side, giving him the key of life and the other supporting him. Thutmose III wanted to show that he was accepted by the gods after the debacle with his stepmother, Hatshepsut.
The thing is, Thutmose was too young. Hatshepsut had to take control to keep the country stable. The priests of Amun supported Hatshepsut in this, and after, they still continued to support Thutmose, as we see him giving many offerings to Amun.
Thutmose's eyes, nose, and mouth have been chiseled out here, as well as his name, a fate that befell this pharaoh when people figured out what happened between him and Hatshepsut. At one point, he started changing Hatshepsut's temples, but the people, some of them at least, were not having it.
Painted in blue, the hidden god Amun, bathed in a ray of sunlight. The namesake for Thutmose III's son, Amenhotep II. Amenhotep II did much to please Amun. We have stela coming from this temple where Amenhotep says that he has defeated the enemies in the north, in Libya and Syria. He then says he defeated the enemies in the south, in Nubia. He took 6 of these enemies and hung them on the walls of Thebes. He then went down into Nubia and hung one from a temple in Napata. Amenhotep even says that he hung enemies from the prow of his boat returning from the foreign lands. These were clear warning messages from Amenhotep II to the Nubians. He extended his father's temple, not only dedicated now to Amun, but to Ra Horakhti as well.
Here is a pharaoh between two gods, with the name above Amun-hotep, the ruler of Inu. Inu is Cairo, Menefer, Memphis. So this is Amenhotep II inside this temple of Thutmose III. Even in the courtyard, we have the name of Thutmose IV repeated throughout. So this temple was added on and adapted by several kings.
The temple was originally built to celebrate Thutmose III's Jubilee, shown performing these celebrations like leading the cows of Amun or running around the track, a tradition that dates back over 1,000 years before the reign of Thutmose III, something that every pharaoh wanted to do. The hypostyle hall contains the names of 3 dynastic successors, Thutmose III, his son Amenhotep II, and his son Thutmose IV. Thutmose is shown on an equal level with the gods, something that Ramses II would do many years later during the 19th dynasty.
Inside this temple at Amada on Lake Nasser, we have 2 19th dynasty rulers. Very interestingly, here we have Siptah. His name is written here, the very young, sickly king. He was so young and so ill that his sister over here, Ta-Wazret, actually took the throne as a co-regent, and then she became a fully fledged pharaoh. Unfortunately, things went a little bit awry for Ta-Wazret, but it's quite interesting to see that they even left their mark in a temple all the way in the south in Nubia, Siptah and Ta-Wazret. Approaching the fortress of Kasr Ibrim. This fortress was first started by Sesostris and built on by several other pharaohs, and even well into the Coptic period, this fortress was used as a hideout, as a church, even for the Muslims who came in here during the Crusades. There's so much history on this little island. In fact, it was at one stage a big mountain. Underneath of this fortress, there are several temples that are now lost under Lake Nasser. We have a temple for Thutmose III with an inner sanctum with 4 statues shown. Beside that, we have Thutmose III again, sitting here on his throne, receiving the offerings from Kush, the viceroy of Kush, the taxes coming in. We can even see over here, this is the list of the taxes that were brought to this fortress right here. And finally, we even have New Kingdom, 19th dynasty, Seti I, here Seti smiting a Kushite while receiving offerings, taxes, tribute from
the people of Kush. On this island as well is where we find the Merowe people. The people of Merowe were a strange mix between Egyptian and Nubian. They had their own culture and their own art style. The Nubian Museum in Aswan has statues and a temple hailing from Kasr Ibrim.
This lion is found in Kasr Ibrim. Very special art,
Yes,
different than the art of ancient Egypt and
because this is all Meroitic art.
yes, Meroitic art.
Meroe, from Meroe.
Meroe influence.
Yes, yes.
Because Meroe, it's located at the south of this, in North Sudan.
in between culture.
Between, yes. You collect between the Nubian native civilization or art and the ancient Egyptian art as well.
You can see it's so different.
It's totally different.
It's weird.
Yes, very weird. When you look, you think they are Roman, but when you know very well, they are from Meroe. Very weird.
Strange bar bird.
Yes. And beautiful at the same time. You can imagine it's a bird and man head and also sandals of man. I never ever seen something like
And
that.
breasts.
And breasts is also.
It's not quite rigid. It's not quite round. It's this weird in between.
In between everything.
Yeah.
Man and a bird, male and female.
Yeah. So interesting.
So interesting. The hieroglyphs, the statues, they select each part of ancient Egypt and they did, for example, the statues from the New Kingdom, the hieroglyphs from the Pyramid text, the mortuary temple from the New Kingdom. Mix of everything.
Although the Meroitic people were not from this specific island or this specific region, they were further south. They did have a big settlement here on this island. It was the combination of Egyptian and Nubian meeting and creating a unique culture. Sailing on emerges the feared Nile crocodile. It's at this point that I rarely feel like I'm heading deeper into Africa. As night falls, we scan the bank for crocodile eyeshine. One man draws the shortest straw and has to jump off to moor the boat down for the night. Day 4, and we are 3/4 down Lake Nasser, ready to sail on closer to Sudan. On the horizon emerges two mountains, Abu Simbel. Built by Ramses II, one dedicated to Nefertari and the other to himself. It has been my dream for so long to see these temples from this perspective. I can't believe how privileged I am to witness these temples from the water. It's a moment I will never forget. We leave the temple behind with the thousands of people that flock to it every day to continue sailing on, because tomorrow I will have the temple all to myself. We pull in just outside of the village set up in the 60s to accommodate the people who moved the monuments. Just before sunrise, the sun lightly kisses the temple, causing it to become a beautiful pink color. At the center of the facade is a god known as Ra Horakti, meaning Horus of the horizon. In a smaller figure next to Ramses is his chief wife, Nefertari. On the opposite side is Ramses' mother, Mut Toy. Tied up below their feet are the African captives. By building this temple in Nubia and showing the captives, Ramses was sending out a strong message. The captives were from Nubia, Kush, Merowe, Libya, and beyond. There is a change on the opposite side below Ramses and Nefertari. These are the tied-up captives of the north, identified by their unique hairstyles. Canaanites, Hittites, Assyrians, Persians, and more. Ramses clearly showed the Egyptians as in charge. The different forms of Horus are lined up, attentively guarding the temple. Out of all the relocated temples, Abu Simbel was the most unique and challenging. It was raised 65 meters higher and 200 meters back, each block cut by hand. The entire Abu Simbel relocation project took over 8 years to complete. Astonishingly, even the 2 mountains it was originally carved in was recreated. The temple was commissioned after Ramses' Battle of Kadesh and took over 20 years to complete. Ramses' pleasing Amun was the ancient name. Now it is called Abu Simbel because in 1813, when explorers were led here by a young boy, his name was Simbel. The temple now means the father of Simbel.
As we walk past the colonnaded hall here, Ramses is sitting on either side as Osiris. It's amazing to have this temple all to myself at sunrise, because I get to witness the phenomenon of the sunrise on the statues of Ramses, Amun, Ptah, and Ra.
The sun bursts through the entrance on 2 days a year, 21st of February and 21st of October, marking the pharaoh's birth and his coronation. Amun-Min anointed with oil by Ramses on the side, with other images of the pharaoh giving offerings to the gods. In the sanctum, a barge containing a statue of Ramses as Amun would be placed. It was here that Ramses fully became a god. On this site, he wanted to remind us of his greatest achievements. Possibly his most iconic scene, the Battle of Kadesh.
Ramses on his horse and chariot, shooting his bow and arrow out towards the fortress of the Hittites.
He fought in so many victorious battles, starting from the reign of his father. But the one battle that Ramses was most proud of was Kadesh.
The echoes in here, without a single soul. You can just imagine when the priests came in here, burning incense for Ramses, how that would have sounded. Passing scenes like this. Passing scenes like this one, with Ramses II smiting enemies from all nations before the Almighty God, Amun. It is absolutely breathtaking. Ramses on his chariot with his horse, after a victorious battle, returning with Mahes, his pet lion, the lion that we've seen depicted throughout the temples along the now Lake Nasser. Mahes leaping forward, mouth open, tongue out with joy. Mahes' name means the one who is beside him. This is probably one of my favorite scenes, and people forget about this beautiful, majestic animal that fought in war with Ramses. Before them, we have Ramses' army approaching with their bows, and before them, the captives. These are Nubian captives, bound around the neck and the arms, with Ramses leading them in to the city.
On the other side, we can see the Egyptians training Mahes, taken to the battle of Kadesh. The entire battle is documented in this temple. Ramses' issue with the Hittites started back in the reign of his father Seti. Seti won for a brief time, but by the time of Ramses, he wanted to take control. En route to Kadesh, Ramses' men captured 2 Hittite spies. Pharaoh's men tortured them, wanting to learn the truth about Mutawalis, the king of the Hittites, and his location. The men were brought before Ramses. They told Ramses that Mutawalis was 200 kilometers north. Ramses' men continued forward, set up a camp just outside Kadesh across the river, now in modern-day Turkey. However, Ramses was deceived. The 2 men had lied, and Ramses and his men were ambushed from the Hittites across the river. The Egyptians were outnumbered. It looked like defeat. The Egyptians fought valiantly, but then another Egyptian unit arrived, and they were able to chase the Hittites back across the river. Both sides retreated for the night. At camp, Ramses received a letter from Mutawalis asking for a draw, since Ramses had killed the Hittite's son. The next day, Ramses and his injured army set out for the stronghold of Kadesh. The city was perfectly placed between the river. The faster Egyptian chariots encircled the city, perfectly illustrated here. The battle was chaos. They seemed evenly matched. After hours of fighting, many Hittites were dead in the river, and many Egyptians were killed. Ramses returned back to Egypt as the victor. The total severed hands of the fallen vile Hatti, as Ramses referred to them, were presented to the pharaoh. Some historians say this was boastful, and that the battle was a draw. Yet the Hittites wrote letters to Ramses referring to themselves as your servant. If they won, why would they refer to themselves as this? Nevertheless, Ramses II was a great warrior and fought in countless successful battles throughout his empire. Ramses' legacy does not only spread to the battlefield, he also had many wives and produced almost 200 children. This side we have Ramses' sons, his firstborn sons, starting with Amun-Herkhepshef and ending here, many sons that would ultimately go into battle with Ramses. In scenes here, we can see 3 of Ramses' sons that accompanied him into battle. It was quite a family operation for Ramses II. The young princes are indicated from the side lock of hair, here with his brothers, his name written out, Amun-Herkhepshef. This temple is to commemorate Ramses' war efforts, showing him smiting his enemy. He's in battle, killing a Libyan man, and over here, stepping on the head of the enemy. This prolific warrior wanted to show what he did. He fought in so many battles. He lived until he was 96. Ramses II, showing himself here as a living god, all-powerful. And the god that is worshipped in this temple is on this wall, right over here. We can see Ramses II offering 2 jars of wine with his name, Usr Ma'edra, written here. And another special god, now not seated with a triad of other gods, but as a single deity, wearing the ram's horn of Amun. This god's name is indicated over here. It is Ramses II. Ramses giving offerings to Ramses, because by this point in his life, he had retired from militaristic actions and took a more religious and political role. And for that, his sons became part of the military, and Ramses then was deified. Although this is not the first time, many pharaohs were deified. Above, we can see where Ramses II had his coronation, at Jebel Barkal, down in Sudan, just a few kilometers from here. There's Ramses standing before the serpent coming out of the mound. That signifies the sacred mound of Amun in Nubia. Visually, Amun is distinct from his crown with 2 feathers. He often appears with blue skin, as he was the hidden god, the god that was always present. Amun had many roles in ancient Egypt. He was the supreme god, the king over all gods. He was connected with the strength of the ram, which is why Ramses often wears the ram's horn of Amun. Lord of truth, father of the gods, maker of men, creator of all animals, all things great and small, Lord of things that are, creator of the key of life. This is how Ramses referred to Amun, even including him in his birth name. He is always shown in the company of the gods, like the fierce lioness goddess, Sekhmet, the one who symbolized strength in war. Apart from the god of the living, Amun, Ramses also connected himself to the god of the dead, Osiris. Ramses becoming Osiris, becoming a god, meaning he will be reborn and live forever. In the main temple at Abu Simbel is my favorite scene. Well, second favorite scene. I'll show you my favorite in a moment. We have Nefertari shaking sistrums before Ramses, giving an offering of incense to the gods. But Nefertari is shown tall and slender, beautifully depicted in full color in this temple. On the other side, we have the god Amun-Min, shown with his erect penis, the god of fertility. Behind him is Ramses II with
Hathor. Hathor here would actually be Nefertari, because both of these royals were deified within this space. My absolute favorite scene inside Abu Simbel is this one. It is Ramses with the goddess Mut. Yet Mut over here is again Nefertari. Nefertari is holding him behind the head, pulling him in by the arm, ready to give him a kiss. It is so touching, so beautiful, so romantic, exactly how Ramses II was with his wife.
Their religion was based on balance, and we can see the balance here between female and male gods blessing Ramses. We know that the ancient Egyptians held women in high regard, and Ramses was no exception to this. A rare scene shows Nefertari as a young woman with the side lock of youth, shaking the sistrum before Hathor. Nefertari and Ramses had met when they were around 13 years old, before Ramses became pharaoh. Nefertari was not only Ramses' wife, she was his companion. She was trained by Ramses' mother to be the best wife and the best queen possible. We see them performing many rituals together. The second columned hall features Ramses in intimate, direct scenes with the gods. Montu, the Theban god of war, offering the key of life to Ramses, gently touching it to his nose. Montu's hand reaches to the back of the pharaoh, supporting his head, supporting him in his efforts. The protector of Pharaoh on earth, Horus, supports a smiling Ramses. The doorway before the sanctuary shows the pharaoh performing his jubilee rites, and hidden in complete shadow is the mysterious god Ptah. Opposite is Khnum. Ptah was the god of craftsmen. Khnum was the god that crafted your destiny. These two came together and formed the destiny for the then deified king. The outside of this temple contains a closer look at the life of this pharaoh. A chapel dedicated to the god of wisdom is on the side of this magnificent structure. A head of Ramses lays in the sand. It broke off during antiquity in an earthquake. Commemorating a Hittite princess union, many steles such as this around the temple give us an insight into his reality. Possibly the saddest scene here at Abu Simbel is on a stela on the side. It is showing Nefertari seated on a throne, enclosed by a canopy that usually was associated with death. We see Ramses II with their daughter Merit Amun offering to the gods. Nefertari is seated below because at this point she had already died. This is just one of many everyday scenes, if we can call it that, of Ramses on the outside. Some steles show Ramses with his son receiving offerings. Next to Nefertari's temple are other steles as well. The prince is identified through the feather scepter. The viceroy of Kush bows before the pharaoh. And of course a stele glorifying Ramses in battle, one of the longest ruling pharaohs of all time. Though just a few steps away is the second temple, dedicated to Ramses' love of his life, Nefertari. She is one of just a few queens to have an entire temple dedicated to her by her husband and Pharaoh.
The smaller temple at Abu Simbel, yet it's the more beautiful one. It's the first time I've ever been in here by myself. I have time to observe the face of Hathor, the face of Nefertari, inside this beautiful temple. But my favorite scene is further down here. It is the inner sanctum with the statue of Hathor coming out. Nefertari underneath the chin of Hathor. Over here is Ramses giving offerings to both of them. And around the side over here is Ramses and Nefertari seated on the throne of Egypt, shown at the same height, shown as equals.
This scene would suggest that Nefertari was a co-regent with Ramses at one point. She was in charge of the politics when her husband was away at war. One event would cause Ramses to change everything. While he was away, there was an attempted attack on Nefertari.
Nefertari even accompanied Ramses II into several battles. A strong woman behind her even stronger husband. She's shown here supporting him, wearing a beautiful dress with the long hair and the beautiful looped earrings. Next to her is Ramses smiting his enemy. They are quite a team, I would say. On the other side of the temple, we can see another scene of Ramses and Nefertari at battle, this time not with the people of Amurru, but the people of Nubia. Ramses smiting the Nubian man by holding up by his hair.
This smiting was overseen by Amun, who offers Ramses his sword.
And the beautiful Nefertari shown wearing a short wig, again supporting her husband. And we know that she accompanied him on at least 2 battles. She was quite a phenomenal woman.
A very strong female presence is in this temple, not only through the gods, but through Nefertari's image repeated over and over. She wears the mother goddess crown of Mut. Ramses shown wearing the horns of Amun, connecting these two spiritually. The king holds out incense. This act would have been for eternity, as when people walk down the center, he's burning incense for the offerings coming to his great royal wife. Nefertari selected the other wives for Ramses. We can see that these two had a strong bond, not only for their love, but for their country. Above the queen is the name of Ramses, and above Ramses is the name of the queen. They were equal.
Inside Nefertari's temple, with the columned hall with Hathor and Ramses and Nefertari repeated several times, we see Ramses giving offerings to the gods to ensure a peaceful life for him and his wife. We see Nefertari again shaking the sistrum before Hathor, with Ramses right behind Hathor, wearing the horns of Amun, offering to Ra. In this hallway here, we can see Ramses giving an offering on this side to Hathor, shown in the barge. Yet, repeated on the other side of this temple is Nefertari performing the exact same role as her pharaoh husband, Ramses II. Here is Nefertari offering lotus and papyrus to Hathor on the barge in the marshes. The crowning of Nefertari. Here we see Hathor, we see Isis, and they are placing the crown of Mut, upon a young Nefertari. In this way, they are proving that Nefertari has become a goddess.
We know that Ramses was not born of a royal family line. He was born in the north, in Avaris. Nefertari was born in Luxor, in Thebes, or Waset. There is slight evidence to suggest that Nefertari's family were of noble origins in Thebes. She was the perfect wife for Ramses. Not only beautiful, not only intelligent, she could secure Ramses' future to becoming a fully fledged god. By marrying a woman of such stature, it proved to the gods and the public that he was worthy.
Ramses II, shown with the god Set, the god of chaos. They are both here because on the other side we have Horus, the balance, making the pharaoh a balanced ruler, showing the chaos and the justice coming together. And of course, Ramses II was born in Avaris, a Hyksos capital, where the god Set was revered. Even Ramses' father's name was Seti. So this is a rare image of seeing Set and Horus placing the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt on the pharaoh.
Here, Ramses writes a dedication where he says that Nefertari is the one for whom the sun shines. He wanted to show the importance of his wife, and thus he put these two statues of her on the facade at the same height as himself.
Standing next to their parents are the children of Ramses and Nefertari. Here is a young prince. On this side is another young prince, shown with their beautiful side lock of youth. And what's interesting is, beneath the father, we have the sons. And next to the mother, we have the daughters. And here are Ramses and Nefertari's daughters, the young princesses.
It's heartbreaking that Nefertari never saw these temples completed, as they reflect her name, the most beautiful of them all. We have now reached the end of our journey, 350 kilometers south of Aswan. Sailing over Balana, the burial site for Nubian kings between 400 and 600 AD, before Christianity took over. Undecorated tombs now sunken under Lake Nasser. It is impossible to know who these crowns belong to, yet they are the crowning jewel in our journey, the final outcry of ancient Egyptian and Nubian culture that survive from Lake Nasser.